It's late 2023, the Phoenix area. Investigators with the State Attorney General's office are looking at apartment rents. They're up 76% since 2016. Something is off. These 4 building rents are 12% higher than others, but they offer similar amenities. They have different landlords, so you'd think they should be competing with one another. But they weren't. The prices were allegedly being set by one entity, an algorithm owned by a company called RealPage.
And in response to that, Berkeley, California decided to ban this service known as RealPage, the infamous service that allows landlords to severely raise rent prices through Collusion and their rental pricing algorithm. And in response to that ban, they've decided to sue. They argue that their First Amendment rights are being violated. Now, look, I am not a fan of this software, of this program at all. I think it's problematic. I think that pointing to this as the main reason why you have issues with rising rent prices, particularly in the state of California, kind of misses the forest for the trees, because the biggest problem that's leading to rent increases or mortgage increases, the value of housing going up so severely in California is that we're not building enough housing. That is the heart of the issue. So I am not at all discounting that. However, this type of software doesn't make the situation any better. So before we see if there's any merit to the claim that their First Amendment rights are being violated, let's first keep in mind that RealPage employees have come out and admitted some pretty interesting things, especially when it comes to anti-competitive practices. Let's take a look.
RealPage has a system set up where the landlords who have adopted the system agree to a set of rules.
One of the rules is that RealPage gets to set rent prices. If landlords want to charge less than the digital oracle suggests, they have to justify their decision.
The justification needs to be reviewed by RealPage. RealPage can push back against the justification.
And if you push back too much, RealPage can kick the landlord out of the scheme, with one insider telling investigators, "Sometimes we were happy to see customers go."
They also had a policing agent that would go out and make sure that the landlords and their leasing agents were staying in line and not deviating from the price that was being set.
They used to have videos where landlords talked about how RealPage's algorithm pushed them to raise rent, but the company deleted it after the Washington Post ran a story. On investor calls, they're flat out saying the algorithm is going to recommend higher lease rates for every property.
So there's actually a lot more receipts from where that came from. So an ebook produced by RealPage says that the company allows corporate landlords who are technically competitors to work together to make us all more successful in our pricing. RealPage bragged that landlords that use its software continually outpace the market in good times and bad. And by outpace, what are we talking about? They succeed in raising their prices, as a result of the service that RealPage provides them, which again is this way of colluding with other landlords to keep prices up. And if a landlord goes against that, they get kicked out of the program. So we also have some excerpts from a Justice Department lawsuit. RealPage acknowledged that its software is aimed at maximizing prices for landlords, referring to its products as driving every possible opportunity to increase price, avoiding the race to the bottom in down markets, and a rising tide raises all ships. A RealPage executive observed that its products help landlords avoid competing on the merits, noting that there is greater good in everybody succeeding versus essentially trying to compete against one another. Guys, competition does what? What is the argument we hear in regard to the wonderful elements of capitalism? It leads to competition. Why is competition good? It drives down prices. But when you have a program like this, when you have a service like this available to landlords, well, then they're able to essentially collude to all keep their prices up so that competition is mitigated. And so I understand why Berkeley would want to, ban a service like this. Landlords who sign up for RealPage must agree to share the following information for their properties: occupancy rates, rents charged for each unit and each floor plan, lease terms, amenities, and move-in dates, move-out dates, all of this like very specific detailed information. So again, I understand why Berkeley wanted to ban this, but RealPage is fighting back. Before we get to that lawsuit, John, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I will agree with one of the earliest points you made that obviously there's a lot of things that are contributing to rents going up, and I don't know that I think that this is the biggest one or even the second biggest one. But some are easier to solve than others, and some are more obviously unacceptable than others. Getting more housing is very difficult. There's been a lot of efforts to try to get that done. I don't think nearly enough has been done, and I think some of what's being done now, I think, goes directly contrary to it, like trying to, mass deport millions of people, many of whom are overrepresented in construction trade, seems like a really bad way to stimulate more of that, crashing the economy so people don't feel like they can invest in more construction, probably also bad. But anyway, that's complex to solve. This just seems like, first of all, how's it legal at all? It doesn't seem like it should be. Also, I don't even really understand what the product is. It's like we help our customers outpace the market. And you know what we do? We tell them, charge more.
Yeah.
They couldn't have figured it out. They were staring at the price and they're like, I want more money and I don't know what direction to go in. Yeah, I guess you could charge more, I suppose. Now, maybe there could be a service like this that's sort of acceptable if it like really tracks like granular week to week change in demand, and you find that it often brings prices lower and then it drives prices up and it's block by block or whatever. But when all it's doing is saying charge people more, it seems kind of stupid and definitely goes contrary to everything we've been told about how capitalism is supposed to work, as you pointed out.
Exactly. So Berkeley's ban is set to take place this month on April 24th, which is also the day Armenians commemorate the Armenian genocide. I thought I would just slide that in. Now, RealPage's lawsuit, though, calls the ordinance a sweeping and unconstitutional ban on lawful speech. Okay, arguing that Berkeley's law violates the First Amendment's prohibition on content-based speech restrictions and is based on misinformation. RealPage's, you guys, what do you mean misinformation? You guys just say it. Like your employees just say it. Like what the whole objective is. You guys are very transparent about it. So what misinformation are we talking about here? RealPage's suit insists that Berkeley's ordinance violates the First Amendment because it prohibits speech based on its content, namely whether the speech provides recommendations or advice on rents or occupancy levels. So Stephen Weissman, who's an attorney for the firm that is representing RealPage, has stated that RealPage only bases its recommendations on the customer's individual property and publicly available information. But he didn't really take into account the punishment toward landlords who decide, well, I want to compete with these other landlords, so I'm going to lower my asking rent for tenants who are considering renting from me. So look, again, I like that there's a city, there's a town that's actually fighting back and taking RealPage to task. We don't know what the outcome of this ban is going to be. We don't know what the outcome of the suit is going to be. But again, I think when it comes to housing affordability, you're right, John. This is an easier way to tackle one of the factors. But it's also true that even if Berkeley is successful and wins this suit that's been filed against the city, we still have a housing shortage. That is the main factor. We need to build more housing. And it's really hard to do that in the state of California because of environmental laws that were put on the books, not really because of the environment, but to prevent people from being able to build more housing. That has been the go-to move by some of these not in my backyard type folks. And it's been to the detriment of a lot of people who live in California, who work in California, who desperately want to put a roof over their head, their family's head. We need to fix that issue. These like issues on the edges might alleviate some housing related issues, but it's not the heart of the problem. But with that said, I think it's important to also set a tone in regard to these types of services and how what they're doing is unacceptable. It's gaming the system to the detriment of Americans who need housing, period. So we'll see how this plays out and we'll stay on the story and give you updates as the story develops.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.